All right, today we're going to tackle one of the most game-changing techniques in AI right now, how you can take a massive, expensive model and, well, shrink it into something that runs right on your own machine for free. And yeah, when I say free, I really mean it. Just look at this. This chart shows a pretty typical monthly API bill. We're talking hundreds of dollars, right next to the cost of running a distilled model for the same task. And that cost? Zero. Look, this isn't some crazy exaggeration. For so many common tasks, this is the reality. It's the difference between just renting intelligence and actually owning it. So I'm going to start with a pretty bold statement here, and it might sting a little, but if you're building an AI SaaS product right now, and your whole strategy relies on just calling a premium API for every single little task, you are probably making a massive mistake. So what's the real problem here? It's that you are burning money paying for this gigantic general-purpose brain to do a very simple, very repetitive job. I mean, think about it for a second. You're using a model that can write incredible poetry, that can ace the bar exam, just to pull structured data out of an invoice. You know, it's kind of like hiring a nuclear physicist to do your taxes. Sure, they can do it, but it's a wildly expensive and super inefficient use of their brain power. So, what's the solution then? How do we fix this? Well, it's a process called LLM distillation. And you can think of it like a strategic brain drain, where we essentially copy the exact slice of knowledge we need from that giant AI and transfer it into a smaller, specialized model that we control. Okay, so what is it officially? LLM distillation is this process where you use a huge, powerful teacher model, like a GPT-4o or a DeepSeek, to train a much, much smaller student model, something like Llama 3 8B. Now, the goal here isn't to copy the entire brain, not at all. It's to teach the student how to master one specific task, so it can do that one thing just as well as the teacher, but for a tiny fraction of the cost and time. You know, this analogy makes the whole concept just click. The teacher model, the big one, it's like a Harvard professor. It has this vast general knowledge, but it's very, very expensive to consult. The student model, that's like a really bright high school student. It's cheap, it's fast, and you can train it to become an absolute expert on one single subject, which just happens to be your specific business task. Okay, now this next part is super important because this whole technique used to have a bit of a flaw. Historically, we could only teach the student the final answer. The professor would just say, the answer is 4, and the student would just memorize the what. But a recent breakthrough called chain of thought distillation, it changed everything. Now, as you can see on the right, we can distill the professor's entire thinking process. The student doesn't just learn the answer, it learns the how, the step-by-step logic, and that is what makes these small models so surprisingly powerful. So how do you actually do this? Well, it really boils down to a simple 3-step blueprint. First, we're going to create our specialized data set. Second, we use that data to train our student model. And third, we deploy it and just watch that API bill vanish. Let's walk through each one. All right, step 1, we've got to create our data. But you can forget about spending weeks and weeks manually labeling thousands of examples. Instead, we're going to make the Harvard professor, that expensive API, do all the heavy lifting for us, just one time. And honestly, the process is pretty straightforward. You just feed your raw documents, let's say thousands of invoices, to the big API. And you give it a clear prompt. Think step by step and extract the key data. So for a one-time cost of maybe, $20 in API credits, it spits out thousands of perfect training examples, complete with all the reasoning. This synthetic data set, that becomes your goldmine. Okay, on to step 2. Now that we have our goldmine of data, we can start cramming all that specialized intelligence into a small open source model. And this is where the magic really happens. And you might be thinking this requires some crazy server farm, but the training stack is so much more accessible than you'd think. You pick a small but really capable student model, like a Llama 3. You use a super easy framework like Unsloth to fine-tune it with a technique called LoRA. But here's the most important part, the hardware. You don't need a supercomputer. You can do this whole thing on a single consumer GPU, which makes this technique totally within reach for pretty much anyone. Okay, so we've put in the work. We spent a few dollars generating some data, spent a few hours training the model. Now it's time for the payoff, and trust me, it is massive. First up, and this is the big one, your recurring cost for this specific task just drops to 0. That's it.
You're no longer paying per query, no longer paying per token. You run this model on your own infrastructure, and that variable, unpredictable, often scary API bill is just gone. But wait, it's not just about the money. It's about performance. Instead of waiting several seconds for that round trip to a third-party API, your queries are now answered in milliseconds. For any kind of real-time application, this speed increase is an absolute game changer for your user experience.
I mean, this slide right here, this is basically the mic drop moment. The cost plummets to zero, the speed improves by more than tenfold, your data stays 100% private on-premise, and most importantly, you go from just renting intelligence from somebody else to actually owning the model weights. You are in complete control. So let's zoom out for a second and bring this all together, because this isn't just some clever technical trick. This is a fundamental business strategy. This is about building a real, defensible, competitive advantage, a moat.
I really want you to ask yourself this question. If your entire product's magic is just a thin wrapper around somebody else's API, what is stopping a competitor from doing the exact same thing tomorrow? What is your actual proprietary value?
And that really is the bottom line here. By distilling a model, you're not just saving some money or making your app faster, you are creating a custom proprietary asset that is unique to your business and your data. You're building a real competitive moat by owning your intelligence.